Welcome to Order Militaris Radio TV, and today we're going to be talking about the CIA and the death of JFK. And we welcome Brother Alexis to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on. It's always a pleasure to be on Order Militaris Radio TV. There's been lots of documentaries about the assassination of JFK, but as the years progress, the more and more information comes out, and now we can connect the dots. And since we've been doing a whole series on the deep state in the United States, we're going to just tell you frankly the facts. So, JFK, the first Catholic president, it looks like he got some people upset. No sooner was he elected in April 27th, 1961, not 6 months after he was elected, not even 4 months in office. He gives an absolutely stunning speech, and let's hear it.
Yeah. So, we'll be reading from his speech that you can find on his Presidential Library's website, and it's The President and the Press. Address before the American Newspaper Publishers Association, April 27, 1961. This is President John F. Kennedy, Waldorf Astoria Hotel, New York City. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate very much your generous invitation to be here tonight. You bear heavy responsibilities these days, and an article I read some time ago reminded me of how particularly heavily the burdens of the present day events bear upon your profession. You may remember that in 1851, the New York Herald Tribune, under the sponsorship and publishing of Horace Greeley, employed as its London correspondent an obscure journalist by the name of Karl Marx. We are told that foreign correspondent Marx, stone-broke and with a family ill and undernourished, constantly appealed to Greeley and the managing editor Charles Dana for an increase in his munificent salary of $5 per installment, a salary which he and Ingalls ungratefully labeled as the lousiest petty bourgeois of lousiest petty bourgeois cheating. But when all his financial appeals were refused, Marx looked around for other means of livelihood and fame, eventually terminating his relationship with the Tribune and devoting his talents full-time to the cause that would bequeath the world the seeds of Leninism, Stalinism, and revolution in the Cold War. If only this capitalistic New York newspaper had treated him more kindly, if only Marx had remained a foreign correspondent, history might have been different. And I hope all publishers will bear this lesson in mind the next time they receive a poverty-stricken appeal for a small increase in the expense account from an obscure newspaper man. I have selected as the title of my remarks tonight, The President and the Press. Some may suggest that this would be more naturally worded, The President versus the Press, but those are not my sentiments tonight. It is true, however, that when a well-known diplomat from another country demanded recently that our State Department repudiate certain newspaper attacks on his colleagues, it was unnecessary for us to reply that this administration was not responsible for the press, for the press had already made it clear that it was not responsible for this administration. Nevertheless, my purpose here tonight is not to deliver the usual assault on the so-called one-party press. On the contrary, in recent months, I have rarely heard any complaints about political bias in the press except from a few Republicans. Nor is it my purpose tonight to discuss or defend the televising of presidential press conferences. I think it is highly beneficial to have some 20 million Americans regularly sit in on these conferences to observe, if I may say so, the incisive, the intelligent, and the courteous qualities displayed by your Washington correspondents. Nor only are these remarks intended to examine the proper degree of privacy which the press should allow to any president and his family. If in the last few months your White House reporters and photographers have been attending church services with regularity, that has surely done them no harm. On the other hand, I realize that your staff and wire service photographers may be complaining that they did not enjoy the same green privileges as at the local golf courses that they once did. It is true that my predecessor did not object as I do to pictures of one's golfing skill in action, but neither on the other hand did he even being a Secret Service man. My topic tonight is more sober, one of concern to publishers as well as editors. I want to talk about our common responsibilities in the face of a common danger. The events of recent weeks may have helped to illuminate that challenge for some, but the dimensions of its threat have loomed large on the horizon for many years. Whatever our hopes may be for the future, for reducing this threat or living with it, there is no escaping either the gravity or the totality of its challenge to our survival and to our security. A challenge that confronts us in unaccustomed ways in every sphere of human activity. This deadly challenge imposes upon our society two requirements of direct concern both to the press and to the president. Two requirements that may seem almost contradictory in tone, but which must be reconciled and fulfilled if we are to meet this national peril. I refer first to the need for far greater public information, and second to the need for far greater official secrecy. The very word secrecy is repugnant to in a free and open society, and we are as a people inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweigh the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon those anxious to expand its meanings to the very limits of official censorship and concealment.
Those prophetic words. That's
Mhm.
exactly what's been going on since 9/11. We now have total concealment and censorship,
Mhm.
although it's coming a lot from companies too. So, do you think that he makes more statements in this talk that have angered some
Yeah.
sections? And what specifically?
That he talks about how there is a new uh, war that has been declared on America, but there is no troops marching. There's no shots fired, no missiles launched, but it's within inside our borders.
And uh, does he? There's a famous quote from him about he's uncovered a plot.
Yeah, I
Does he
mean,
make that in this talk, or is he at it another occasion during his presidency?
it's added right. It said right at the end at the day before, 7 days before his assassination. So some little talk that might not have been recorded, but someone saved this quote. There's a plot in this country to enslave every man, woman, and child. Before I leave this high and noble office, I intend to expose this plot. And in another of his talks, he talked about wanting to splinter and break up the entire CIA into 1,000 splinters for what it's doing.
Yeah. So in 19, I think there was this failed attempt to overthrow the government of Castro. The CIA made Kennedy think it would succeed. It was complete failure, and so he fired Avery Dulles, head of the CIA,
Mm-hmm.
who was Skull and Bones, one of the old Skull and Bones members, and that was in the fall of 60, 62, I think it was, or
Yeah.
61. 61, fall of 61. And in the spring, he fires Dulles' a second-hand man, and he puts a military guy in charge of the CIA. So he basically took the CIA out of the control of the Brown Brothers Harriman Bank, and that should upset them. Do you think that they, what evidence we have that the deep state CIA decided to remove the problem? I know he had made the decision several months before he was assassinated to remove the Masonic lodges from all the military bases, which would have prevented the Masonic lodges from controlling U.S. military and therefore the U.S. government.
Yep. So what we know of the CIA is what we know of it, but within it, there is still this shadow CIA developed and created and founded by one scary man, James Jesus Angleton. And he was the main CIA counterintelligence staff chief. He was there until, I believe, Reagan, 85.
Yeah, he eventually becomes the head of the CIA, I think.
Yeah.
He was military intelligence, admirer of fascism. He helped recruit with Donovan, he helped recruit all the Nazi spies into the CIA. And he formed this group in the CIA called CISIG, right?
Yeah, CI-SIG or CSIG. And to do all this dirty work, used the New York lawyer, Merrill Broad, who, according to a CIA memo, was a CIA staff agent in New York City from 1952 to 1971. One of the sensitive CIA staff agents handled by Broad in New York was J. Lovestone, the AFL-CIO International Affairs chief, who transmitted funds to strong-arm gangs in Marseille, allied with Corsican drug traffickers who are part of the Lanxi-Luciano global drug connection.
Yeah, so if you've ever seen the film The Marseille Connection, which is actually a rather well done film, it talks about the mafia connection through Marseille, but it doesn't point out that this drug traffic was organized by the CIA.
Yeah. So another sensitive agent handled by CIA staff agent Broad, Angleton's go-between with the mob, was the Russian defector Anatoly Goltsyn, whom Angleton segregated from the regular CIA bureaucracy in his unending search for a high-level mole inside the CIA. Angleton, according to his biographer Tom Mangold, was quietly building the alternate CIA with his own communication system, archive, and vault, using very dubious information from Lovestone and Goldstein. The heart of this alternate CIA was CIA's inner sanctum, the super secret special investigation group, CI-SIG, where assembled files to show that Henry Kissinger and Averell Harriman were KGB moles.
That's what he was putting out, that they're KGB moles. He started like a witch hunt in the CIA, and that was all part of the psychological manipulation of everyone else in the society, in the organization, in the association. And he knew well as a Freemason, they all knew well as Freemason, that Averell Harriman was their sponsor. They weren't KGB moles, but we're going to do another program on the long history of New York City banks with socialism and how it all began.
Yeah.
They were in importing drugs from all over, weren't they?
Oh, yeah. It was also, what was it? Afghanistan, Kyrgyzstan, all the countries with the stands in it.
And also from Latin America, too. No?
Yeah. Colombia, Mexico. I mean, most South American countries that did the drug trade.
And as we mentioned on other programs, the CIA was founded as a drug-pushing organization because when they took the Nazis into their organization, they started in Europe an organization to oppose, to politically manipulate Western nations to keep them out of the Soviet influence, called Gladio. And that organization was funded by counterfeit British pounds and morphine stolen from the Third Reich by the Nazis who stole it. And so they sold the morphine on the streets as drugs. And they started at the very beginning by dealing in drugs. So the CIA is a drug cartel, if you might say, or at least the deep state CIA. And their agenda is not independent. It's part of the Brown Brothers Harriman Bank, which is Masonic World Control. And it really makes you think that the Masons might have had something to do with this. An interesting point you found out in your research, AJ, is that the people involved in recruiting the Nazis into the CIA were all members of the Knights of Malta.
Yeah.
Even the Nazi general who came over with his whole crew was Knights of Malta. And not Knights of Malta in the sense that they were really knights. They were honorary members, but they were Freemasons, and they've used the Knights of Malta as like the hallway for communication between Masonic lodges.
Yeah.
So we had like how many CIA chiefs who were Knights of Malta?
See, the very first one, William Donovan, Dulles, they say Bush. So pretty much all of them.
A good number of them. A good number of them, indeed. So that doesn't mean the Catholic Church has anything to do with it. Certainly not. But it's the way they infiltrate. It's the way they infiltrate. So what are some? Now to get towards Kennedy's assassination, what are some of the people involved and their connections to this deep state CIA?
Yeah. So, like Broad, Angleton himself allegedly had mafia contacts. On at least one occasion, intervened to prevent another part of the CIA from investigating the banking of illegal Lansky skim from Las Vegas. Now, Lansky is the guy in charge of the BCI, which supposedly went bankrupt in U.S., but the Swiss version is still ongoing. So it's how they get their money into everything. And so, a senior official in Robert Kennedy's Justice Department asked John Whitten, the CIA's one-time chief of Mexico Panama desk and Western Hemisphere division, to investigate a number of bank accounts in Panama because Las Vegas gamblers were using them to smuggle cash off the top of their daily take. Using the CIA pseudonym John Celeslo, Whitten testified to the church committee about Angleton's actions. At that time, we were in excellent position to do this. I thought it was a great idea, and promptly this came to Mr. Angleton's attention, and we had to brief him on it. He said, "Well, we're not going to have anything to do with this. This is Bureau's FBI business," and whammo, end of conversation. We were called off. I went to Colonel J.C. King, who was at the time the chief of the White House division, and told him this, and J.C. King said, "Well, you know, Angleton has these ties to the mafia, and he's not going to do anything to jeopardize them." Then I said, "I didn't know that." And he said, "Yeah, it had to do with Cuba."
Yeah. Had to do with Cuba, had to do with the deep state. So the CIA was asked by Kennedy to attempt to overthrow the Cuban government. And that operation gets flipped and used on Kennedy. That's pretty much what the evidence shows. What have you uncovered?
Yeah. So, moreover, CIA SIG, the inner sanctum of Angleton's alternative CIA, affected U.S. history significantly in 1963. Its so-called 201 or personality file on Lee Henry Oswald, the man known to the world as Lee Harvey Oswald, had been filled with false and falsified information since it was opened in December 1960. And two messages in the 201 file were falsified again in October 1963, in such a way as to allow Oswald to be a credible designated suspect in the assassination of John F. Kennedy 1 month later.
Yeah, so you wouldn't want someone to look like a suspect unless he wasn't the suspect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unless he's the cover for it.
And it goes on. The falsification of Oswald's 201 file may have originated as a legitimate counterintelligence operation. I have argued that the uniquely falsified messages were part of a so-called marked card or barometer test to determine if and where leaks of sensitive information were occurring. This was a familiar technique and was the responsibility of the CI SIG, which was responsible for the 201 file. But by October 1963, we see signs that the CIA cables on Oswald were also being manipulated in order to enable him to become the designated suspect in the November 22nd assassination of President Kennedy. A CIA teletype to the FBI in October 1963, drafted by the CIA SIG officer, withheld the obvious significant information that Oswald had reportedly met in Mexico City with the Soviet Vice Consul, Valery Kostakov, believed by CIA officers to be an officer of the KGB. This withholding helped ensure that Oswald would not be subjected to surveillance by FBI after the alleged encounter, surveillance which presumably could not have limited his ability to become a designated suspect by his presence at a particularly sensitive corner in Kennedy's Dallas parade route. I have argued that the similar CIA withholding from the FBI of information about two alleged 9/11 hijackers, Nazwaz al-Hamizi and Khalid al-Midar, likewise made it possible for them to play the role of designated suspects by preventing FBI surveillance as well.
Yeah, so here we have fingerprints. They're using their authority to modify files, which is supposed to be used in counterintelligence, but they're using it for their own ends and purposes. And they did it in 9/11. That means that they're behind 9/11 too, because
Mhm.
you don't put up false suspects unless you're trying to hide the real ones. And that means these Muslims guys didn't bring down the two towers, or at least
Mm.
they weren't in the planes that did it, or those planes were controlled. From them, I already published the testimonies of several investigating show that those plane crews were on the ground when they were being hijacked, reading scripts poorly written, and that the planes who actually crashed in the towers were computer controlled, because if no pilot, even of the best skill, could have done it on a first try without error, the way they did it. And these guys couldn't even fly a Cessna correctly. So, do we have information on how the CIA assassinated the president?
That we don't have, but from what I've known for listening from another intelligence officer that we had on our programs a while back, Gregory Carpenter, that there were indeed three shots to you. Mm-hmm. And in the way that rifle is that what they say Oswald used is it's not possible to make those bullet holes because they were very, very small. And it went through just barely made little tiny puncture marks into the president's neck and area. And so we don't know how how they killed him, but we do know it's possible that this secret alternative shadow CIA is involved. How they got Oswald to play get Oswald to be the suspect and changed all the information and ruined the day of, what was it, was it Day of Pigs or something?
And the Bay of Pigs, the invasion. Yeah, they messed up the Bay of Pigs invasion. So they engineered one that wouldn't work. The Masons had a lot to gain by assassinating history. Assassinating Kennedy, he was going to dismantle their power in the military. He was going to break up the CIA. He probably would have uncovered the CI-SIG group and traced it back to Abel Harriman and the bank and Brown Brothers Harriman. And Kennedy might be like Trump in the fact that the machine may not have wanted Kennedy to win. They might have wanted Nixon to win. We know that Nixon was a Brown Brothers Harriman agent. He was chosen by them to run for the presidency twice. He eventually did get elected. Kennedy wasn't expected to win, and yet Kennedy won.
Mm-hmm.
And Trump was certainly not expected to win, and yet he won. And maybe this is why the whole apparatus of the deep state has hated both presidents.
Mm-hmm.
And you see to the extent which they've gone. So we're going to do a program this week on how the deep state controls Congress through bribery.
Yep.
And
Afghan smack.
And Afghan smack. So these are not light things. This is facts about America we can't ignore. We're just citing from public documents. A lot of research has been done investigating the CIA, but this deep state CIA is the right-hand arm of the Masonic banks in New York, and this is how they control the federal government when they don't control the president. Even if you got a non-Masonic president, he would have to abolish them right away and arrest them all. And well, now we see that the deep state pretty much controls both the FBI and the CIA. So how do you do that? So it's no surprise that that president only has certain units of the U.S. military that might still be loyal to him.
Yeah.
Very serious affair. It's a very serious matter. And if you're a U.S. citizen out there and you know anything about what's really going on in Washington, the corrupt infiltration, you need to come forward and make it known to the people, because the country has to be for the people. It can't be for some secret private group of bankers and their minions in hidden or infiltrated into the U.S. government. That's not how the country needs to be run.
Yeah. If you have any actual tips for me, you can contact the website and leave a comment there on the show page or contact form, and I'll get it. That way I can actually know it's actually an actual commenter, and I also can figure out if you're really a true person giving tips. So go to overthrow-militarist.net and leave a comment. I'll be notified of those comments, and I'll take a look, and any help is welcome on these big important investigation shows. Any other closing thoughts?
No, it's I love the series. We're learning a lot about history that you're not going to hear anywhere else, and we're just reading documents of other people's investigations. The information we got today came mostly from the report by whom, so people can. I know you're going to list it in the link program, but
Yeah.
special.
Let's see here. It's from Professor Peter Dale Scott from April 2nd, 2020, from Global Research.
Okay. So he's done a lot of research into the CIA and drug running. Although he doesn't connect the dots about the Masonic Lodge, he hasn't researched that part of it. So Anthony Sutton's, we've added Anthony Sutton's investigation on that side of it together. When you're putting all the points on the paper, then you can see the picture. Thank you, AJ, for having me on this program, and I look forward to speaking with you tomorrow about how the CIA bribes Congress.
Yep. So this is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.